Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera to Miss Jamira and everyone. We are from Group 3 will do a presentation on Cold War impact on the Korean conflict. Let me start by introducing our group member, which consists of 5 people. The first one would be SHAHRUL AFIQ, Muhammad Nurul ZHOFAR, NADZIRAH, NURUL FATIN TASNEEM, and me, SITI SHAHRIL. Today's presentation, we will be presenting the introduction, factor and issue, theory related, analysis of the issue, recommendation and conclusion. Therefore, we will start with our first presenter, SHAHRUL AFIQ.
Hi everyone, I'm back to my lecturer, Ms. Jamira and fellow classmates. I'm SHAHRUL from group number 3. We'll start our presentation by giving you guys an overview and brief introduction of our topic presentation today, which is about Korean War. So what is the Korean War actually, right? So Korean War is a conflict between the South Korea and North Korea that started from 21 June 1915 until 27 July 1953, with a total of 5 million soldiers and civilians have lost their life in this conflict. The Korean War has been started over 70 years ago, and today it began when North Korea invaded South Korea following clash along the border with South Korea. After 3 years of fighting, the war ended at the month, with the border between North Korea and South Korea remaining roughly where it was the start of the conflict. As to how the Korea Peninsula actually started to divide into half along the 38th parallel, it was a result of the breakup of the Japanese Empire at the end of the World War II. This was the first hot war and the Cold War, and demonstrated the United States' continued commitments into containment, which the idea that the United States will definitely defeat communism by containing its threats. This Korean War, also referred in the United States as the Forgotten War for the lack of attention, is received compared to the well-known World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War. When Korea was liberated from Japanese control at the end of the Second World War, the United States and the Soviet Union agreed to temporarily divide Korea at 38 parallels of latitude north of the equator. This division resulted in the formation of two countries, Communist North Korea, to be supported by the Soviet Union, and the second South Korea to be supported by the States. And finally, the occupation zones become two sovereign states as North Korea forms a communist government with Kim Il-sung as the leader, while South Korea forming a capitalist government under the rule of SYAMIMI. The United States demonstrates its continued commitment to key elements of its Cold War strategy in Korea. It demonstrates its global leadership by committing resources and soldiers to fight against communism spread in Korea. The United States demonstrates the ideas enshrined in the Truman Doctrine, which promised support for the free peoples of the world seeking to counter communism aggression. Next, I would like to pass Nady to explain about the factors and main issues of the Korean War. Thank you.
Hi, my name is NADZIRAH binti RIDZUAN, and I'll briefly explain the factors and issues of the war. The first factor is when the Korean War 1952-1953 began, when the North Korean Communist Army of Communists-led North Korea crossed the border and invaded South Korea. The issue is for the next few months, they pushed the small South Korean army south to a port city of Busan. The United States and other Western countries were committed to thwarting communist expansion. They forced the Communist Army to retreat in a resolution that was adopted by the United Nations, a body established to protect the peace after World War II. The UN gave its member permission to send troops to Korea. The second factor is American involvement. The issue is America intended to stop the domino effect as well as keep communism within its borders. A four-power trusteeship in Korea was supported by Stalin at the Yalta Conference in the early months of 1945. But by the time Harry S. Truman took office following the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in April 1945, Soviet development in Eastern Europe had started to worry US policymakers. Truman believed that launching an atomic attack on Japan would prevent the Soviet Union from joining the Pacific War and allow the United States to occupy Korea on its own. He made the wrong bet. Stalin declared war on Japan and dispatched the Red Army into Korea on August 8. Korea was only prevented from unification under communist control by Stalin's acceptance of Truman's last-minute plan. With the arrival of the United Nations soldiers, the course of the war turned. After landing on the army at Busan, General MacArthur made a surprise move. This forced the North Korean army to retreat. Pursuing the fleeing army, MacArthur crossed the former boundary and captured territory in North Korea. The third factor is the presence of Communist China on Korea's northern border complicated the picture. The issue is where Chinese threatened to fight United Nations troops if they approach the Yalu River. Across the Yalu River that divided Korea and China stood a huge Chinese army. If the United Nations soldiers approached the Yalu River, the Chinese promised to fight them. There was a sizable Chinese force across the Yalu River, which separated China from Korea. If UN troops reached the Yalu River, the Chinese promised to fight them. The presence of hostile forces along Chinese border with Korea was undesirable. General MacArthur didn't think the Chinese would engage in a battle. He assumed they were playing a bluff. In order to defeat the North Koreans, he persuaded American President Harry Truman to grant him permission to keep moving his army north.
Realism refers to a theory of international relations that emphasizes the role of power, self-interest, and state behavior in shaping international affairs. According to this theory, states are the main actors in international relations and act rationally in order to maximize their national interests, which frequently involves accumulating power and security. There are sub-schools of realism, including classical realism, new realism, and offensive realism. Realism was dominant during the Cold War and explains the ongoing conflict on the Korean Peninsula. However, it is criticized for oversimplifying international relations. Combining theories like liberalism and constructivism may be required to resolve the Korean Peninsula's crisis. International relations theory based on realism consists of several key principles and assumptions. Firstly, realism contends that the international system is anarchic, which means that there is no centralized authority governing the behavior of states. Instead, states are required to rely on their own power to ensure their security. This assumption explains why the US and its allies worked to contain communism during the Cold War, as they saw the Soviet Union as a potential threat to their own security. Secondly, states are perceived as the primary actors in international relations, and according to realism, international organizations and non-state actors play a secondary role, and states act according to their own interests to maximize their power and security. For example, North Korea's development of nuclear weapons is seen as a means of enhancing its own security and deterring potential threats. Realists argue that states are rational and unitary actors with clear goals and consistent actions to achieve those goals. Accordingly, states may use military force to achieve their objectives if they are motivated by their own self-interest. South Korea and North Korea are both viewed as rational actors seeking their own objectives in the Korean Peninsula conflict. Finally, maintaining a balance of power is essential for international stability according to realism. To prevent any one state from becoming too dominant in the international system, states strive to maintain a balance of power. For example, the US and its allies work to maintain a balance of power between the Soviet Union and the US during the Cold War and the conflict on the Korean Peninsula to prevent communism from getting too much power. The ongoing conflict between North Korea and South Korea has had significant implications for international relations, and one of the most pressing concerns is the risk of nuclear proliferation and the potential for a nuclear war in the region. However, the diplomatic efforts, economic sanctions, and military deterrence have been utilized to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. Another implication is the importance of diplomacy and negotiation in resolving international disputes. Despite decades of tension, peace talks and agreements have been made between North and South Korea. Strategic alliance and security cooperation have also been highlighted. as essential in maintaining stability and preventing aggression. And the conflict has also resulted in significant humanitarian concerns and human rights violations, highlighting the importance of promoting democratic governance and human rights protection in the region. The resolution of this conflict requires cooperation from the international community to address the root causes and find diplomatic solutions. Also, the implications of the conflict extend beyond the region and have far-reaching consequences for global stability and security.
Now, I am SITI SHAHRUL will be presenting the first lesson learned from this topic. The first lesson learned is knowing how important is an alliance. Alliances are typically formed when two countries agree to protect and defend one another against external threat. Therefore, we must have a trustworthy allies, which is essential especially in a war conflict. This alliance, for instance, make it possible to avoid or prevent the possibility of attack by other power, because countries that receive support from their alliance demonstrate an increase in their power. For example, we can see that the union between America and South Korea can be evidence where Harry Truman, the 33rd President of the United States, declared that the United States would participate in defending South Korea from North Korea attack, which resulting in South Korea becoming more powerful compared to North Korea.
Meet again, so I'm Sharafi. Would like to proceed our presentation by stating the second lesson that we can learn from this conflict, which is current war. This is the devastating consequences of the war, particularly the current war. Current war has started in 1951 until 1953. This war resulting in the loss of millions of lives and left the current peninsula deeply scarred. Also, current war resulted in the deaths of about 1.2 million people died as a result of the conflict in South Korea, 1 million in North Korea, 36,500 American soldiers, as well as 600,000 Chinese soldiers. The war caused significant destruction to infrastructure, which results in many people becoming homeless and without having any access or accommodation such as shelter, food to survive, and etc. The combat persisted until the armistice was signed until July 1953. The armistice condition can be called as the demilitarized zone, which is a strongly fortified border between the two nations that was around 250 kilometers long and 4.02 kilometers broad. This conflict serves as a reminder for us of the consequences of war. That's all from me, and let us proceed to SITI SYAMIMI for the next lesson that we learn from this conflict. Thank you.
Lastly, in the third lesson we learned from this topic is to ensure that whoever becomes a leader must have a strong dedication. Leaders need to acquire flexible way to grow their influence region and develop their communication and responsibility ability, because people can trust them to make a reasonable and appropriate decision. This is because a leader is one who is going to lead his nation and people to achieve success. For instance, when President of the United States authorized United States military forces to help South Korea in its defense out of concern that the Soviet Union and Communist China may have encouraged the war, show that the United States leaders are dedicated to show empathy and bravery to join the war in a way to help South Korea.
Assalamualaikum to Madam and all my friends. My name is NURUL TASNEEM, and today I would like to talk about the recommendation. The first recommendation is denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Both the South and the North have expressed a desire to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula in order to remove the threat of nuclear weapons from the peninsula. This will create an atmosphere and conditions that are conducive to peace and peaceful unification of the country, as well as will contribute to peace and security in Asia and the rest of the world. North Korea has remained a critical problem for the global nuclear non-proliferation region for a long time. The Korean Peninsula Peace Initiative recommends a systematic and all-encompassing strategy for resolving the nuclear standoff of the peninsula. This strategy is predicated on the notion that the nuclear issue cannot be resolved without addressing the more fundamental problem of North Korea's security concern and its diplomatic isolation. The systematic strategy begins with a moratorium on testing nuclear weapons and missiles and concludes with dismantling North Korea's nuclear program. The all-encompassing proposal aims to replace armistice agreement with a peace treaty, ending Pyongyang diplomatic isolation and improving relations with Japan and the United States. Under this agreement, Pyongyang committed to freezing its illicit plutonium weapon program in exchange for aid. Next recommendation is North Korea must accept peace standard to join the world community. The only way for North Korea to become a full member of the world community is to accept international standards for maintaining peace. For this reason, the nations that are concerned should spare no diplomatic effort in their pursuit of a solution that will convince North Korea to join the world community. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea ought to figure out a method to sever its relation with the United States of America. The international community must demonstrate to North Korea as a part of a process of establishing confidence that it will not waste any opportunity towards a practical and overall compromise and should continue to exert both tangible and intangible influence over the situation. This is necessary in order for the situation to improve. And the last recommendation is direct inter-Korea economic cooperation. Direct economic cooperation between the two Koreas is to form an economic community by implementing connection project. The goal of this is to contribute to the peace and the unity of the Korean Peninsula by prescribing issues necessary to encourage reciprocal exchange and the economic cooperation between the areas south of the military demarcation line and the area north of it. The agreement focuses on mutual respect, renunciation of armed aggression, exchange and collaboration in various fields, and free people exchange between the two countries.
To conclude, the Korean Peninsula conflict was initiated during the establishment of post-Cold War ceasefire, and after many initiatives have been taken, all the reconciliation attempts have failed. It is because the two countries have yet to sign and implement one, even though both have approved a peace accord to end the Korean War. Other than that, the majority of Koreans also support the reunification and peace between the countries because there is the existence of family members on the other side of Korea who split up long ago as a result of this terrible conflict. However, recently North Korea engaged in a way that raised concern to South Korea, signaling that this was a provocation and led South Korea to respond as well. The action conducted by North Korea as well as the response given by South Korea illustrate that the government from both sides is not serious about negotiating any kind of peace agreement. As a result of this conflict, it is not the president of the country but the people of the country who will be the one to suffer the most.